91 years old. No dementia diagnosis, no significant memory loss, no Alzheimer's. I remember the name of every single person who has ever passed through my life. I remember the birth dates of my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. I wake up every single day knowing exactly who I am and where I am. This is not genetics. This is not luck. This is something I've been doing for over 30 years, every day, without missing a single week. And today I am going to tell you exactly what it is. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from right now? Which city? Which state? I want to know if this content is actually reaching the people who need it most. The human brain is made up of approximately 60% fat. That means it needs quality fat to remain structurally sound. This is not an opinion, it is anatomy. The problem is that for decades, the dominant health narrative demonized fats so broadly that people were unknowingly depriving their own brains of the very fuel they need most. While that was happening, the rate of cognitive decline was rising. Neurodegenerative diseases were advancing into younger and younger age groups, and conventional medicine kept treating symptoms after the damage was already done, instead of strengthening brain tissue before it started to deteriorate. I did the opposite, and these four oils were at the center of the strategy that kept my mind young even at 91. The first is extra virgin olive oil, but I need you to understand why most people use it wrong and why, because of that, they are not getting the benefits I get. Olive oil is rich in oleocanthal, a compound that researchers have studied for its ability to act on proteins associated with cognitive decline. What very few people explain is that this compound is heat sensitive. When you heat olive oil beyond certain thresholds, you destroy exactly the fraction that matters to your brain. What remains after intense heat serves other purposes, but not what your nervous system actually needs. I have been using cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil at room temperature for over 30 years, not as a cooking ingredient, as an intentional part of my health routine, consumed directly, with full awareness of what it means for my neuroprotection. Beyond oleocanthal, high-quality olive oil contains polyphenols that protect the brain's cell membranes against oxidative stress. Think of it this way. The process of brain aging has a lot to do with oxidation, with accumulated cellular damage over time. These polyphenols act as a barrier against that process. They do not stop time, but they slow the rate of damage. And when you do that consistently for 30 years, the cumulative effect is exactly what you are looking at right now. The second oil generated controversy for years, and that controversy tells me a great deal about how the health narrative often protects interests that are not yours. Virgin coconut oil is rich in medium-chain triglycerides. These compounds have a unique metabolic characteristic. They are converted by the liver into ketone bodies at a much faster rate than other fats. And ketone bodies are an alternative energy source for the neuron. What does that mean in practice? It means that when the neuron begins to struggle to metabolize glucose, which happens progressively with aging, and especially in the context of cognitive decline, ketone bodies step in as a reserve fuel. They are able to cross the blood-brain barrier and nourish brain tissue in a way that most other substances simply cannot. I do not use coconut oil because it was a wellness trend. I use it because more than 20 years ago I noticed that during the periods when I incorporated it most consistently, my mental clarity was visibly different. And at 91 years old, I have learned to trust my own body's responses as valid data. One critical point, I am talking about virgin, unrefined, unprocessed coconut oil. The refined version loses a significant portion of the properties that make it an ally of neurological health. Quality matters more than quantity, always. The third is the most studied of the four when it comes to brain health, but most people still use it in a way that dramatically limits their results. High-quality fish oil is the most bioavailable source of DHA and EPA, two long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. DHA in particular is a structural component of neuron membranes. It is literally part of the physical architecture of your brain. When DHA levels are adequate, communication between neurons is more efficient, cerebral plasticity is preserved for longer, and the chronic low-grade inflammatory process, which is associated with virtually every neurodegenerative disease, is kept in check. What most people do wrong is treat fish oil like a supplement you take for a month and stop when the symptoms disappear. The brain does not work that way. It responds to sustained interventions. The incorporation of DHA into cell membranes is a process that happens over time. The real benefit shows up for those who are consistent, not for those who are sporadic. I have been using it for decades, and there is one more point almost nobody brings up. The quality of fish oil varies enormously. An oxidized, poorly processed, inadequately stored product delivers more oxidative damage than benefit. Smell is an important indicator. High-quality fish oil does not have a rancid odor or a taste that lingers for hours. When it does, the product is already compromised. The fourth oil is the one I hesitated longest before speaking about publicly, not because there is anything wrong with it, but because I knew that most people would never have heard the name. And when you talk about something unknown, you need to be sure you are ready to explain it with the depth the subject deserves. Perilla oil comes from a plant called Perilla frutescens, native to Asia, used for centuries in the traditional medicine of countries like Japan, Korea, and China, not as a cooking ingredient but as a documented therapeutic resource within those cultures. In the West, it barely exists on the health and wellness radar, and that is an enormous gap because the profile of this oil is extraordinary from a neuroprotective standpoint. Perilla oil has one of the highest concentrations of alpha-linolenic acid among all known plant-based oils. We are talking about percentages that reach 50–60% of its total composition. Alpha-linolenic acid is a plant-based omega-3, and what makes it especially relevant is that it serves as a metabolic precursor for the body's own synthesis of DHA and EPA. In other words, it feeds the same chain that fish oil feeds, but through a different pathway, which means the two can work in a complementary way without overlapping function. But what sets perilla oil apart from other omega-3 rich plant oils like flaxseed oil, which many people already know, is the presence of specific phenolic compounds, including rosmarinic acid and luteolin, which have been studied for their ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and act directly on brain tissue. These compounds have shown in research settings the capacity to inhibit certain inflammatory cascades within the central nervous system, that kind of chronic silent neuroinflammation that advances for years before producing any noticeable symptom. What caught my attention decades ago when I could barely find this oil available in Brazil was exactly that. While other oils work at the periphery, modulating the body's systemic environment in ways that indirectly benefit the brain, perilla oil appears to have a more direct affinity with nervous tissue. It does not need a long road to get where it matters. There is one more point almost nobody mentions. Perilla oil also contains flavones, with properties that researchers have associated with the modulation of pathways related to neuronal oxidative stress. Think of the neuron as a cell that accumulates damage over time through constant exposure to metabolic processes and environmental factors. That accumulated oxidative damage is one of the central mechanisms behind age-related cognitive decline. Compounds with antioxidant capacity that reach brain tissue directly are therefore of a value that goes far beyond what most conventional cognitive health protocols even consider. I have been using perilla oil for many years, in small and consistent amounts. It is not an oil you find easily anywhere, and that is precisely why it stays off the radar. The health and wellness market tends to revolve around what is most accessible and most profitable to sell at scale. Perilla oil does not fit that profile, and paradoxically, that is a signal that it deserves your attention. Write in the comments whether you had ever heard of perilla oil before this video. I am willing to bet that most of you will say no, and tell me which state you are watching from, because I want to understand which regions have people who are open to discovering brain health resources that have not yet become mainstream. You are probably watching this because you care about your own brain health or about the health of someone you love. That alone makes you different from most people, who only start paying attention when the decline has already set in. The best time to start protecting your brain was 30 years ago. The second best time is right now, not tomorrow. Not after you finish dealing with everything else, right now.